everybody for being here tonight. Appreciate you always, parents and kids, making it here. You know what, why don't we, just for a little while, I hate to do this, but do you mind closing that door? That one might be a little bit cold. Or, I don't care, you make the decision if it gets loud, but, good, so thank you for being here. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. God, I give you thanks for these 7th and 8th graders and for their parents who made these commitments to nurture their children in the faith. So thank you for each parent who got their child here this evening. I thank you for this congregation and for the ways that we can be there for each other. And as we look at this topic of stewardship tonight, help us to open our minds and hearts for all the ways that you bless us so that we might be a blessing to those around us and to our world. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I love to do, this is one of my favorite parent-student learnings, and the topic is one that you aren't supposed to talk about, because you're never supposed to talk about what are the 4 things in polite company you aren't supposed to bring up, like at Thanksgiving.
Finance,
politics, religion,
finance,
money, and say it.
Sex.
Sex. No 7th and 8th graders going to say that. Yeah. Okay, politics, money, religion, and sex. Stay off those topics and everything. So, I have found that this hour is often very helpful because we're going to talk about money in a way that maybe you don't normally talk about with your kids. So tonight's class is very focused on you talking to your kid. Okay, and both of you, I have questions, or you're going to interview each other at like 3 different times during the next hour. Okay, so let me just start out with some facts at the top of the sheet here that I thought were kind of interesting. I'm just going to read those 4 bullet points to you. Only 1% of parents who give an allowance say that their child ever saves any of that money. Interesting, huh? 1% of the kids save anything. Second one, if you give 2 couples $50 to spend at a restaurant, the couple given cash will stay on budget, while the couple who uses a credit card will spend more. Does that make sense? Next one, 80% of Americans list money as the #1 source of stress in their lives. Yeah. They say in premarital counseling, when I work with young couples, the #1 cause for marital strain and even divorce is money. Either you don't have enough, or you have enough and you can't agree on how to spend it. Money causes stress. The last one there, 84% of college students admit the need for more financial education. So parents, what we are trying to do as a faith community here is help you have pretty important conversations with your kids so that in a few years, when they're out of the house, they have a value system on which to make decisions. Make sense? Okay. There's a guy named Nathan Dungan who is the inventor of the blue pig that we have become very familiar with here at Westwood. And Nathan gave a seminar here for junior high kids some years ago, and he had us all shouting this line kind of throughout his presentation. I put this line down because I think it's an important one to remember. Right in the middle of your sheet there, it says, "The choices we make with our money can change the world." Do you believe that? I do too, and that's why I want to talk about it, because Pastor Jason had a great sermon last Sunday on being artisans of the common good. In other words, you and I are people who can shape the common good. We can shape our culture, and we shape it. We talked about kind of a funny article about how our driving habits shape the common good. Just not a 7th or 8th grader. It's very short percent. But the choices that we make with our money can also change the common good. So that's why we talk about that as people of faith. So will you say that line with me? I mean, we're going to say it several times in the next hour, right? The choices we make with our money can change the world. Look at me and say that. The choices we make with our money can change the world. Okay, now I'm going to have you kids talk to your parents. So turn your chair a little bit. Students, you'll see this is an interview. So listen up for 1 second. The questions are right in front of you. Kids, ask your parents those two things. What was the main message your parents gave you about money? And what is the best financial decision you've ever made? Wow, hard questions. Then, parents, ask your kids, if you could name one thing, this is scary, parents, if you could name one thing you've learned about money in our house, what would it be? Let them say anything they want. Kids, be honest, this is your chance, okay? Second question, who do you know who gives of their time or money generously? And how do you think that sharing has positively impacted their lives? Okay, I'm going to give, parents are going to talk for a couple minutes, then kids are going to talk for a couple minutes. How about it?
Don't take it for granted.
So they want me to tell you the main message my parents gave me about money.
Your turn. You probably waste money,
And you kind of protect them.
Someone you can take Just say we don't know if we spelled it right, but we got kind of see if we can pull that one off.
I don't know if that's
How did that make you feel?
it's not easy.
We did it.
Oh,
The next thing, what is it?
So what's fantastic? If you could be one thing to learn about money in our house, what would it be?
spend the water. Spend the water.
Who do you think gives their time or money generously? And how do you think that sharing his how do you think sharing his affected your we want you to
Hey, about 1 more minute. Not right now, you don't.
Oh, they're the same.
Can I stop you to buy a card for somebody?
And pay for the employee.
Have you gotten through your questions?
We did both forms.
They're the same.
Yeah, they just figured that out.
Oh,
Yeah, he thought Rachel to grab one of each.
And
Okay.
there's two colors.
I'm going to ask some of you to share what the message is in your home now, or even parents, the home you grew up in. But I'm also kind of curious, we're all in this place together, and there are messages that are taught, said, or just kind of felt around the church that I would like to hear, you know, what messages you hear in this place too. Because I think around church sometimes people get freaky when we start talking about money because people think it's always an ask, right? We're asking to get money for something, which is why I love to talk about it with you guys now when it's like, we're not talking about the offering, we're not talking about asking for money, we're talking about how does our money and our life of faith fit together, right? Did you know that Jesus talked about money? There are more lines about money in the New Testament than there are about love, faith, belief, prayer. Isn't that interesting? And I think it's because Jesus knew this was a stress producer, although I don't think they used that word back then, and that this was, you know, it's a tough subject for us because we're naturally kind of hoarders. You know, we're selfish people, and that this is something, it's, a generous life is something that is not always natural for us. It's something we have to break. But it's really important for me, and I think I speak for all the pastors in saying that we have open and honest conversations about this. And I remember a few years ago during Lent when we did like hard questions was kind of the topic for Lent. Or no, it was the where people shared different, I forget what our title was, when we did mental illness.
Things you don't talk about in church.
Things you don't talk about in church, okay? And I'm going to share this publicly. I'm not breaking a confidence because this person shared this in front of 300 people that night and is very open about it. But James Banky, who is now, interestingly, the treasurer of our congregation, he's a finance guy by training, had opened a restaurant over by my house over at Excelsior and Grand called Mojitos. And restaurant is a really hard business to be in. First of all, I think that's true. And it went bankrupt. And he had borrowed, he grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and he borrowed the money for that restaurant from his mom. They financed the farm so that James could start this restaurant, and it went bankrupt. And he sat up in front of the congregation as one of our church leaders and talked about what it felt like to declare bankruptcy and what that was like to lose his father had passed away, to lose his mom's money from the farm. So this is tough stuff, and I think it's, I give James so much credit for being willing to stand up and say, I've been through this in my life. Other people stood up and talked about their alcoholism or depression, or one gal shared about a miscarriage she'd been through. Hard stuff that we don't talk about always in church, but I think I just have so much respect for James because I think money can be tied up with our self-esteem and our self-worth. And he kind of took the risk to open up, and I want this to be a place where we can talk about not only, oh, how do we share and how do we give and how do we do these things, but that, wow, this causes the most stress in our lives, and what do we do when we're drowning in debt or when we're bankrupt. That this is a place where we can have conversation about that. So what, are any of you kids or parents willing to share the message? What message, because I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of them, so there's no wrong answer here. What message do you hear in your home? Because some families are like really into saving, and the parents maybe grew up that way, and so then that's how you run your house, and you save, 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 save. And some families are just more kind of loose with their money, or some families are very disciplined. What was kind of the deal in your house? Anybody willing to share? Yep.
So my dad taught accounting, business, math, business, law, and personal finance at our high school.
Okay.
So money was talked about in our house all the time. So it was, budgeting everything, and where every penny went. So I got to college and it was free spending, so for a little while I went a little nuts. But after that, I figured out what I was doing and brain back a little bit, and then used some of those things in order to get, where we are now. So
Yeah, interesting. So how do you function as a parent then, having been raised with that real?
So we do a budget as well, and we keep track of where our spending is and try to save towards things that we need to do for the house or whatever. But yeah, so we're
Cool, and you're shaking your head. That's true, huh? So you have to be a part of your family budget? You kind of know what's going on a little bit? Sort of is more than most people. That's awesome.
Tax returns,
Cool.
6 years old.
Okay, what are other money messages? Either parents from the house you grew up in, or kids from your house now?
Well, don't spend more than you make.
It's fair. That is a line. There you go. Yeah. Okay.
Be content with what you have. Be happy with all it. It doesn't have to be about greatness, but I've taught you can be clean. And focus on that versus, is it new or something like that.
Right. To that contentment or satisfaction with how it is. Yep. Something else? Anybody else willing to? Yep.
So, my husband and I grew up very differently, and so we've really come together. My family growing up didn't have a lot, and we never did much, and so I was very frugal, and I never wanted to splurge or spend money, because I was always like, well, we don't need to go out for a really nice dinner, that's a ridiculous amount or whatever. And he came from the other end where, as a young person, maybe he didn't make the best financial decisions, but I think having a balance is really healthy, because you can't take it with you either. So to sometimes maybe have life experiences that are amazing, so that you have something at the end of the day. And I'm always a worrier, because I work in healthcare, and I see how one medical tragedy can really devastate a family. So I'm always save,
Yeah.
we're on the other end of it. So we try to find a balance there. And that was hard. It took a long time for us to get to that point where I'm a little bit more like him, and he's a little bit more like me.
Well, and then I find in doing premarital counseling that real often there's a saver and a spender in each couple, and you rarely end up with someone that you have the same money story. We all have our own money story, right? How many of you are from homes where your money story was, we don't talk about money?
Oh, I suppose.
Yeah, I would have guessed, that's good. That's a smaller number. I mean, do you kids feel like you have a sense? Raise your hand if you feel like you have a sense of, not necessarily how much your parents make dollar-wise, but kind of where your family is at, how much you can spend. There's some conversation on how much you share, save, and spend, to go with our blue pig thing. Do a lot of you, some of you have that sense?
When we were growing up or now?
Well,
sorry.
yeah, either. I mean, I'm asking kids now, but I think
Parents are house painters.
some of you, I mean, I just think parents, and I had to learn as my kids hit about this age to do this with my kids, because we didn't talk to our kids that much about it. And my parents didn't either, but what I saw in my home growing up was we have enough, therefore we have to share. That was a message that I grew up with. And I feel very fortunate to grow up with that message because I think that instilled in me some things I want to do. But then I married somebody where that was not, my husband's family didn't grow up really going to church that much. And they weren't, super active in a community, and it was more like we use our money for ourselves. And so Bob and I had to figure out, right, what are we going to do? And what do we want our lives to look like? And then what do you want to teach your kids? There was a couple I married a few years ago, remind me a little bit of your story, where she came from a family where they were more careful with their money, and he came, I knew his parents because they were members here, pretty wealthy family. I mean, they had money to do quite a bit with. And in their premarital session, he came out and said how angry he was at her because she gives money. She is a nurse, so she got a college degree and got a job that made more money than her parents ever made. And so she was giving money to her parents and her siblings. And her fiance was livid that she was sharing her money with her family. He was just like, lazy bums, you gotta work for what you get, and if you earn it, you can get it, and if they don't earn it, they don't get it. And it was a very interesting thing. It was very much extreme because he was just like, if your parents didn't make enough money, that is not our problem. And there's not a right or wrong answer in this, but it just made me realize this is going to be a huge tension in their relationship until they figure out how many checks can she write to her family and how big can those checks be, right? Can you see how this would just be like, oh my gosh, big problem. So what is money for in your family? Is it to save? Is it to share? And then how much do you spend? I think these are ongoing questions. So what I want to talk about for a minute is needs versus wants. And this sounds like, yeah, well, duh. But this has been a really important thing in our family that we still joke about. Well, is it a need or is it a want? Well, okay, it's a want. Because we talked about this when our kids were littler and I was at Target. Target is like I need everything there. I can't ever go to Target and get the coffee that I stopped for, right? It's terrible, and I feel badly about that, but I keep doing it. So this needs and want thing is really important, and I talk about it because I need to hear it too. We need some stuff, and we want some stuff, and those are two different lists, right? And we in this country who have the ability, the luxury of going to Target or even other places are, we're 1% of the world's population, right? And so I think for reasons of global equity, these are things we need to think about, all of us. So we were in Target and it had just turned spring or something, so all the, cute new t-shirts are out there or whatever. And Sophie, my daughter, was like 10, and we had just been through this class with this Share Save Spend guide. It's like, I'd forgotten about it. And so I'm like, oh, Soph, look at this cute t-shirt, and she goes, oh, Mom, that is not, it is cute, right, but that is a want, not a need. And I was like, oh, come on. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm the mom trying to talk my teenage daughter into buying, can I buy this for you? So cute. And she's like the other extreme, oddly, so I don't know where she got it. But she was separating wants and needs. It's like, I don't need this t-shirt. So what I want you to do at the bottom of that sheet is, again, kids and parents together, I want you to write a definition of what is a need, and maybe list a few examples. What are you talking about when you say need? Because it might look different in each family, okay? And what is a want? And then name a few things that are not needs, but wants. Okay? 2 minutes.
No, it's not necessarily.
And then do those next couple lines where it says list 3 things that you bought in the last couple weeks and circle if they were needs or wants. Okay?
Something that may enhance your life. You don't want puppies. Oh, that's a good idea. Like for the
One more minute. Okay, let's gather and read a large group again here. Okay, let's talk about needs for a minute. And you know, I just want to remind you that as we sit here in a nice church, in a nice community, our list of needs is so skewed. You know, I think about when I came back from our first church trip to Tanzania, and all of a sudden, you know, it's just like you want to throw everything you own out the window, which does nobody any good. I think there's a coming to terms with what we have. But I remember getting mad at my husband for standing in a warm shower for like 10 minutes and wasting water. You know, all of a sudden you become conscious of things that you don't have to really think about here. And I think I'm just wanting to make a point of the value of getting out of our culture when you guys have a chance, you know, through youth trips, church trips, you know, as you go on in school, to see places that are different than here, because I think it really kind of helps us realize the difference between wants and needs in new ways. But can a couple of you give me your definition of need? Let's talk about our needs first. Somebody on this side, would you read your little need thing? Yep.
Necessary for survival.
Okay.
Shelter, food, water.
Okay, you went right to that bottom line basics. That's what I need. For what did you say? To stay alive? What did you say?
I said necessary for survival.
Necessary for survival. Okay? Somebody else in this area. Need, yep.
Necessary to everyday life.
Okay, so that's a little broader. Like, what did you include besides food and
Like a house or a car, and sometimes like a cell phone if like you're in a book or something.
okay? It's interesting things. Yeah, I mean, car. Do we need a car? Right? We wrestle with that, I think.
I found, you know, when my, and it was my older kids, now kids have cell phones at like, but I sort of had a rule about it, and then one of my kids got left at the junior high after a sporting event, and nobody ever thought that he wouldn't have a phone to call. And we didn't know where he was, so we wandered around for like hours, so I was like, that's it, you know. So is that a want or a need? And especially now with work, they email. and you have to be available and you have to respond. So it's really kind of touchy.
No,
It
that's
depends
right.
on if you wanna live at a shelter and then you've got a roof over your head and food to eat, or if you want to be employed
Yeah.
and.
And our needs have changed then, right? And that's where I think it gets hard when there are families who can't pay for Wi-Fi, and so then how do we help provide that, what we now say is a need, right, for everybody? I mean, I think this is so much harder, I think, now than it was, for our parents, for sure. Right? Yep.
There was about cars and stuff, there was an interesting thing on Pier 11 probably about a month ago about this neighborhood, this guy who actually on Saturday mornings helps people that are unfortunate and that need car repairs, and he does this like charitable thing out of his garage, and then people just have to pay for the parts, they don't have to pay for the labor. And it really, they were speaking to how these cars really make a difference, like this saved 4 hours out of this woman's life for her taking the bus back and forth to school, and that she could do things for her kids, so it becomes really a need. Having a vehicle to get to a job or something like
Exactly.
that becomes a
Yeah.
need versus a want, and people think of
Yep.
luxury, but,
There's-
a lot of times it is a need, and it was life-changing for this one woman who had 2 young kids and everything else, so.
We have a ministry here called Connect the Dots that's just kind of getting going, that is connecting people who live like at Meadowbrook housing with jobs that are out in the suburbs more, like small manufacturing places. And the issues are they can't get there and they don't have childcare. And so as a church, we're saying these are needs, right? If these people want to work and the jobs are on the other side of Plymouth, a car is a need, right? To give food for my family, or childcare. These are conversations I want you to know we have around this place. How can we at Westwood, who does childcare really well, look up and down this hallway, how can we help provide childcare for people who need to work to feed their family and need a car and So, any other need definitions that are different than what we've heard? Yep.
Necessary for physical, spiritual, and mental well-being.
Oh, interesting, I like that. Okay, so did you get some examples of that?
Not really, but probably for spiritual, maybe like a Bible or a hymnal or a church building.
Nice, did you hear what she said, necessary for spiritual, mental, and physical well-being? Yeah, which kind of takes those basic physical needs that we need to survive and says, but we're a bigger person than that. We're a fuller person. There are other needs. I like that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, one that could be on either, depending on your point of view, is healthcare.
Yeah. How can it be on either?
Well, like Phil said, there's no healthcare in the wild. But I know people who can't afford to go to the dentist.
Right. Yeah, but it isn't, it is a need. It's not always a met need, perhaps. Yeah. Okay, what about wants? How do we talk about wants that are different than needs? Give me a definition. Okay?
A desire.
A desire. Okay, give me an example.
A nice car.
A nice car, not just a car, but a nice car. Okay? Good. Anybody else? A want? Yep. A smartphone. Okay, is that, we were just talking about, is that a want or a need? There's
A smartphone is a want.
okay, versus a flip phone or something. Do those exist? Yeah. Yeah, no, good. What about wants over here? Yep. Vacations. Yeah, and if you put that through your filter, Emma, that's an interesting, we all need some time off and away somehow, right? I would almost say that's a spiritual, physical need to some extent, but there are most of the world probably doesn't get vacations, right? Yeah. Yep.
Tea.
What?
You don't need
Tea? Like drinking tea?
She likes her tea.
Yeah, well, any particular thing that we like to eat, you know. Ben Jerry's Cherry Garcia. Okay, that's a want.
That's a really bad day.
Good point. Did you have a want?
I also
Okay.
that would be like nice to have, but not really necessary. And, for one, it'd probably be some sort of like a smart car or a really big house or something that's like really fancy that you don't really need, but I wouldn't look at a smartphone as not a need. Because the smartphones, like someone said, you need to be able to email and stuff like that. And then if one of your kids or somebody is having like an asthma attack or some sort of allergy reaction and they need to go to the hospital, I don't think you're gonna be able to call someone to, either pick you up.
You're making a good case here, you guys take lessons. Yeah, no, I think a smartphone, I mean, this is interesting, because you guys are at the age, right? Where, I mean, we were just talking about this somewhere today with some staff, just saying, at what age do you do this? You know, do most of you guys have smartphones? Just tell me, because I don't know, my kids are older. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right at the age where this is a hard decision, right, parents?
For home too.
When do you do this? And is it a want, or when does it become, when is it a need? Because you make some good points, you know, and there are kids who need one, perhaps for health or other kinds of reasons. Okay, I'm going to give you a case study, so it's not just about your house, real quickly, and we're going to do this as a group. So see where it says needs and wants case study? With the start of her senior year, and you guys, I know you're already in this in middle school, because sports, music, your school sweatshirt, all this stuff just costs a lot, right? Parents, I feel like I used to write a zillion checks, and now I never write checks. With the start of her senior year of high school, just a week away, and the cost of senior pictures on the table, which I'll just warn you if you don't have a senior are, it's like wedding pictures or something, it's terrible. That should say Erin, is growing frustrated with her mom, Nora. Erin's parents have been divorced for several years. She and her mom have always been careful with their money, but lately Nora has become concerned about her job security. It's the mom. The pressure of high school expenses is testing both of them. The costs add up quickly, from clothes and activity fees to graphing calculators and car insurance. As Erin's list grows longer, her mom's anxiety continues to increase. I want you to talk as parents and kids for a minute, okay? How could Erin and her mom address some of this money tension, and do separating wants and needs, how might that be a helpful part of the conversation? Okay, this is a tense situation, pretty real. Talk about it for 1 minute with each other.
So like if the mommy is just like. Maybe
Hey,
yeah,
let's talk as a large group. Any ideas on how can Erin and her mom Nora, any ideas for how to kind of move forward in this situation?
With the idea of splitting up her needs and wants, they could get her needs met, and then maybe she could have 3 or like 5 wants a year that they meet or give to her.
Nice. Did you hear that? Kind of split up those needs and wants and then maybe kind of hack away at some wants, but separate what's most important. Good. Any other ideas?
Erin could get a job and supply her own wants.
There you go. Divide it so Erin is responsible for her own stuff. And parents, I think as kids go through high school, we need to prepare them to be on their own after that. And so how do we train them? You know, I think helping them manage their money is an important step. Chris, you were going to say something?
It was kind of along those lines too, is whenever we've been low on money, we just hustle and get another part-time job for a while or sell some things or, just to try to balance out. And so between the two, the mom and the daughter could probably do something like that.
One of the most helpful times in my family's life, and I mean my family with my husband and me and our 2 girls, and we've been just lucky in a lot of ways. Bob and I have had good jobs, both of us are pastors and love what we do. But at one point, Bob was in a horrible, well, the church wasn't horrible, it was just a situation that was not working well. And in talking with the bishop said, if I were you, I'd resign. I think you need to get out of here for the sake of your own health and the church. And afterwards, I remember my daughter, Allie, who was in high school at the time, she said, I finally feel like I got Dad back. He, when you're in a place that's hard, and so he was himself again. But what that did was cut our income in half one day until, we didn't know how long it would be until he got a call as a middle-aged male, and we don't know how to do anything except be pastors. And so it was a really interesting time because it wasn't something we kept from the kids at all. We sat down as a family and said, we're going to have to kind of do everything in half. And so we didn't go out for dinner that much before, but we just said, no more out for dinners. And, it wasn't, I don't mean to say that this was some major crises, but as a family, it was so good for us to have to go and to bring the kids in on that. And for a while, and I was stunned how much money we saved simply by being conscious of it. All we did, and I think what happened was, we all crossed our wants off for a while, and we just went with the needs. And guess what? We were fine. And that actually surprised me, because I didn't know how much money I was spending on probably wants, and for myself, and for my kids, and for my family, and all good stuff, right? But times like that, I think we can work together as a family, or when we have, on the other end, somebody gets a big bonus. Some people have jobs where at the end of the year, a bigger check might come in. What if we dealt with that as a family and said, what should we do with this? What decisions can we make around this bonus check, parents, that might help teach our kids something, and what input might they have into that? I love what I've learned from my kids, and I remember this children's sermon, I'm sure some of you have seen it, where we've lined up, I've done this a few times, lined up 10 apples for the kids and said, God gave us all 10 of these apples. We all have these 10 apples in our lives, and how many of these apples should we give away? And how many do we need? So it's kind of wants and needs. And most kids, what do most kids say? And these are the children's sermon kids. So they don't have maybe a lot of ideas on how to spend money yet. What do they say? Usually half is the least, the least amount they'll say. Some kids will say, well, I'll keep half and I'll give away half. That seems fair. Well, that's a 50% right there. And some kids will say, well, if I have 2, I can give 8 to other people because 2 apples is fine for me. And that is just so not how we think as adults, And so I love that thing about kids, that there's something we can learn there, that it's not, I realize we're talking about apples here, but that gets us to kind of this share, save, spend thing. And the blue pigs in our church, we've actually pulled the little yellow things off, so they just have 3 compartments. But did any of you get these like when you were in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade? I think you guys are the ages where we gave out a lot of these, right? So there's 3 compartments, and this guy invented these blue pigs. He worked for Thrivent and wanted to help teach people about different things to do with money. And so we can share it, we can save it, and we can spend it, right? Before we talk about that, what I want you to do is turn to another parent-child and say, which of these is the most fun for you to do, and which of these is the hardest for you to do? In your foursomes, sharing, saving, or spending. Which is the easiest and which is the hardest? Go.
Ready?
I don't know if any one thing was mean to me, like sharing. I suppose you just sent a check out every month to some charity and feel always rewarding as if you like
Sharing is
give money to someone that saving is kind of like it's nice to have a little money.
You wanna know you have enough for retirement and everything.
The actual process of saving is the hardest.
And I always feel guilty about spending it, so that's hard. Maybe I always feel like really done that hard.
Just when you say spending is easy too. I mean, spending is
Yeah.
Savings, you have to have more.
I like to splurge. Yeah, but just, just like you want, to do something.
Okay, I'm going to have everybody be honest with me. How many of you said the hardest thing to do, I'm going to ask on each. The hardest thing is share. Okay, the hardest thing is save. The hardest thing is spend. Oh, interesting. Okay, some of each.
I'm gonna spend share.
Spend share is the vote. Okay. Why is it hard? Well, no, that's true. That's not a fair question. I won't ask you why.
If I can offer, I'll say, like,
Yeah.
I raised my hand for a share, and it's not about, it's about where I would choose to allocate the money, as opposed to, I give the money, and I give the money happily, but it's sort of like, what's,
Deciding
yes,
importance.
what's the place to for this value?
Yeah, nice. Yep.
That's kind of the same thing with spending it as it is sharing it. Because with sharing, you can be open to give it to the person or the community, but you don't know where to put it. It's the same with spending. There's thousands of different things you could spend your money on. You have no idea idea which thing to get,
Right.
because there's so many options.
And some are good, and
Yes.
some are wants or none, right? Yeah, yeah. There is kind of a rule, you know, that financial people talk about, and we talk about it in the church too, because it actually comes out of the Bible. The notion that of percentage, it's 10-10, 10-10-80, that we should share 10%, we should save 10%, and we can spend 80%. And that, when I talk to kids about that, that's where the kids will always say, you know, I don't need to spend 80%. I mean, when you hear those percentages, it sounds kind of doable, and 80% sounds like a lot, right? And yet, do you know how much the average church-going person, I mean, those of us who are already a part of a life of faith, share kind of nationwide statistically? Anybody want to guess like what percentage that might be? And this, I only know for church, because if you took the whole charitable giving range, I'm sure it would be much greater. It's gone from, in my ministry, it's gone, at least in the Lutheran church, from 3% to 2% to 1%. And in Minnesota, thankfully, I think we have a pretty high charitable giving rate, if you talk about churches and all nonprofits and places good places that we give our money to. This is a fairly generous culture, which I think is great. But I think that 10-10-80 rule, even a financial planner, to say nothing of our life of faith, would say it's a good rule to live by. And if we all did that, we would have a lot less probably arguments in our house, and also we would be able to live with kind of that feeling that maybe my needs are met and maybe even some wants are met. And you know, I don't think it depends on income. I think I never hear a person who has less income say, I don't have enough to give. It's usually people who have more money who get stingier. You know, I think that's kind of our yucky human nature. The more we get, the more we want, the more we cling to it. You know who the most generous people are that I have ever met? The people in Tanzania who they don't have money to give for offerings. So in church, when we pass around the offering plate, they pass around the offering plate, they put in it like bananas from their tree and like little things that they've sewn, little craft things. And then after church, they take all the stuff that people brought that wasn't money, and they have an auction out in the church yard, and other people buy the stuff so that money can be given to the church. You see what I'm saying? So if I don't have money to give to the church, I could offer to teach 10 yoga lessons, or I could knit a shawl or something, and then the church would sell that and get the money for it. So what I think is so cool about this is they know that we are all created to be givers. We love to give. Giving scientifically gives us an adrenaline rush when we can give. So God made us able to give, and in the Tanzanian church, they found a way to allow everyone to give, even if they have no money. Isn't that cool? I just think what a gracious thing that the church provides a way to give that is not just financial, because they truly have people who all they can do is pick a banana off the tree in their yard and share that. So kind of an interesting thing. But I'm going to leave you with one last story. There's a waitress in my husband's church who has been a waitress all her life. She's a single mom. She has a couple teenage kids. And she comes home from working at, I don't know, it's up in Robbinsdale, like a Perkins or something. And she has all her tip money in her pockets. Every night, she dumps all her tip money out on the table with the kids, and they divide it out and do this 10-10-80 thing. And I'm thinking, here is a single mom who waits tables at Perkins, and if she can learn to live has learned to live like that and wants to teach her kids that. That has always just, Bob came home and just said, you know, she's amazing. And she'll stand up and talk in church about giving anytime because she's living it and she's living it. It doesn't, again, it's not about how much, it's about what is in our heart and how we handle that, how the decisions, the choices we make with our money, remember the end of the sentence? Can change the world. The choices we make with our money can change the world. And they can change our children, they can change our little community around us. Money is a powerful, powerful tool for good and a powerful, powerful tool for evil. Which is why I think we talk about it as people of faith, because we have choices to make every day around it. So I hope there have been some conversations started that maybe you'll finish in the car on the way home, or parents think about how you might talk about this more at home. Thank you so much, guys, for being
Tax
here
returns,
tonight.
why don't you audit the tax returns?
Oh, you guys, let me just tell you, I have this wonderful prayer called the prayer, it's about simplicity and generosity. It's a beautiful prayer, and I made a copy for each of you to take home and stick on your fridge. So I'm going to stand at the door, and I'll give you on your way out.
I know what I should say at GSA sometime. Party at my house. I didn't hear you doing that.
Hey guys.
Actually, that'd be a cool idea. A gay party. That'd be a fun idea.
We need to grab, can you take the paper and then put these pens and I'll grab the plates. Again, can you grab that? Yes, I love this printer. Thank you. Did she just ask me if I was? And I was like, very sticky. Oh, did you send it? Yeah, I didn't.
I feel like now that no kids, kids are college, it's like, wow, I can make different choices around this place. I can share more because I'm not paying. It's okay. He lives close. Okay. So, right. So, Eric is in. Yeah, it's, I mean, it's really something cool. That's what they were able to talk about. Well, actually, talking is not. I started about it. I think we were started. Together. But then they said, like, okay, if you want to do this, this is I'm going to talk fast. Yes. Because you're going to have to do that. Yeah, right. Well, it's funny because, there was a shoot there after we're now. So have this conversation. And I got ready, like, no, we have to. I know. And I know.
Did we not just have the conversation, like, in the summer, you want to go to Washington DC, you want to go to Camp Back, you'd like to go back to Camp Happy, and you want to do Stages Theater. You cannot do all of those things. So make yourself a list of which things are most important to you, And we can probably swing, depending on fundraising opportunities or other things, we can maybe swing one or maybe two if we're scraping it, you know, like by one or two of those other things. But no, we cannot do all of those.
And for them to have to sort that out. Right. Hi. Yes.
He doesn't know anything about this.
They're married to a Dutch person, it's hard to know.
All the lawyers, yeah.
That's why I'm gonna take it.